Welcome back to Against the Cage. I am your host, Jake Aryeh. I'm here with my co-host, Erich Richter. Eric, how we doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I watched the fights this past weekend. They were kind of meh, I don't know if you got a chance to watch all of them, but I thought they were kind of meh. There was a lot of decisions, and hey, I like betting on decisions, as we all know. Had a good betting weekend, but in terms of the entertainment value, I'd say Scott's event rating kind of held up. It was kind of a meh card. I don't know what you thought.
Yeah, we got an eye poke, another one of those. What else is new? But beyond that, this weekend, a bit of a palate cleanser, if you will. We got Alex Pereira taking on Magomed Ankalaev. Pereira, of course, had a phenomenal 2024. He'd already been taking the UFC by storm, but with a Fighter of the Year 2024, racking up 3 wins, all by knockout. He's on fire. He might only have a few fights left, but this one might be the most important or impressive to get done, since Magomed Ankalaev has kind of been waiting in the wings as this number one contender for quite a bit now, really ever since that decision to a draw against Jan Blachowicz. He hadn't lost since then, but he's had a few fights since then, and he's really been in that number one spot. So number one contender getting his title shot is always an exciting fight. Eric, what do you think about the actual fight itself?
Well, it's like a finally spot for Ankalaev. He has been calling for this fight for a long time. The UFC has denied him this opportunity for a long time. So now we have a fight between a Russian grappler versus perhaps the best striker that mixed martial arts or combat sports has ever seen in Alex Pereira. Ankalaev is a very, very good grappler. He sometimes doesn't use it as much as I'd like him to. He averages less than 2 takedowns per 15 minutes in the octagon, which I just think is crazy to even see. For a guy like him with his wrestling chops, with his prowess, he was trying to show off his striking a little bit more, which I think maybe got him the title fight, but I don't like it for him if he's going to be striking with Alex Pereira, who is as good as it gets. Alex Pereira even told Scott, he was ready for grappling exchanges and be ready to stand for 25 minutes. Ankalaev's not going to be able to stand for 25 minutes. So I have an issue there with Ankalaev and his idea of, standing, or if he's not shooting for takedown within the first 2 minutes, he's probably going to lose. His chin's very high up in the air when he is striking, and Alex Pereira will just feast on that. It's gonna be an interesting fight. It's a fun fight. It's a pick'em. You don't see that very often, especially with Alex Pereira. You get a pick'em price here in the betting markets, but it's gonna be interesting, no doubt about it. It depends on what Ankalaev's head is at going into the fight.
Yeah, I mean, kind of going back to what you were saying before, like, he doesn't necessarily go to the grappling maybe as much as he should. Do you see him kind of falling into that habit? Because as human beings, we're creatures of habit. Do you think he might do that? Maybe not to his benefit.
I had a whole theory. I was, put my tinfoil hat on at one point, and I said, the UFC must have told him you're not getting this fight if you're going to grapple him. And I just think it'd be hilarious if he said, he's like, you know what, fine, I'll strike him. And then he just grapples him for 25 minutes, lays on top of him. Pereira can't get up. The fans are booing. Dana White has to go into the press conference afterwards and say Ankalaev's the champ, has to put the belt on him. I think that would be hilarious. It'd be interesting cinema, to say the least. I would love that to happen. It'd be interesting. Nobody wants to see Pereira lose. We all like Pereira. It's just, it's tough because, where his head's at is really where is everything that matters. He could have finished Jan Blachowicz in that fight. Dana White said it. It went to a draw. It was a bad decision. Dana White didn't agree. And Ankalaev was very upset. And, then he also got submitted by Paul Craig with less than 5 seconds left in a fight that he won. He 10-8'd every round. So Ankalaev, it's hard to trust where his mind is at. I think that strategically he needs some work. I don't know who his coach is, but yeah, I don't know why he's not training with Khabib, but he should be.
Yeah, one thing I want to touch on, which you brought up again, is that draw from Jan Blachowicz. I just want to bring this up really quick because I think it's ironic. I think that Dana, after the post-fight press conference, like you're saying, very displeased with the fight, immediately makes a different fight with Glover Teixeira and Jamal Hill. And I find it ironic because when Yuri had gotten injured, Glover, of course, was the other opponent in that fight. And he said, I'll fight Jan, but I won't fight Ankalaev. The UFC literally says, no, Ankalaev's getting the shot. And things just went completely different after that. So that kind of dichotomy I find to be interesting. Before we get back to that, because I know we wanted to talk a little bit more about Ankalaev and the UFC, for Pereira and his grappling, he is a massive, massive guy. I mean, he holds a candle to Tyson Fury when it comes to height. He looks like he could stand in the ring with the guy. Maybe Ankalaev's got better technique in the wrestling and in the grappling, but Pereira's a big guy. Do you think he might be able to negate that?
It's honestly, I've seen him taken down by guys that are worse grapplers than Magomed Ankalaev. If Ankalaev is going to go for grappling, he should be able to take him down with relative ease. I think Pereira's gotten a lot better. He's been training with Glover Teixeira. Obviously, everybody saw the snow clip of him grappling with Glover Teixeira. What is Pereira? Is he a purple belt? All right, well, like Ankalaev's got like a lifetime of grappling under his belt. You can't make up for that in just a couple of years. So honestly, if Ankalaev wants to take him down and lay on top of him for 5 rounds, I think he has that option. I just don't know if I trust his willingness or mental fortitude or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if I'm willing to trust it. And that's what makes this fight really interesting, is that there's a clear path for victory. In my mind, there's a clear path for victory. Ankalaev is a massive 205er. You said it. Pereira fought at 185. He's not a small light heavyweight either. He was 229 pounds coming into Monday. He posted a video of him on the scale at 229. So he's not small either. I have an issue with Ankalaev, his willingness to grapple, and I think that's the story of the fight. Is he willing to go to that length? Is he willing to just go for the takedown, spam it for 25 minutes? That's the question, because every round starts on the feet.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, even if he does spam it for 25 minutes, it's still kind of an interesting fight. Like you said, the fight starts on the feet, and you give Pereira an opportunity, and that's really all he needs. So a lot of questions floating around this one. Something you mentioned about Pereira's weight coming in 229. Obviously, he's got to cut that weight down. A big thing about weight cuts coming into this week that I thought was interesting is on the UFC countdown, we found out that Magomed Ankalaev would be participating in Ramadan during this fight camp. It comes out yesterday that he's actually not sticking to it 100%. For those who don't know, weight cutting in mixed martial arts, boxing, and in wrestling in some cases, typically water weight is the thing that is coming off the most. You have to drink a bunch of water at the beginning of fight week. You're drinking like 2 gallons a day, and the reason why you do that is for your body to want to shed it off when it comes to getting into the sauna the night before weigh-ins. You shed like 15, 20 pounds in some cases. If Magomed Ankalaev was trying to cut any weight while participating in Ramadan, that would have been an insanely crazy thing to do in terms of how he'd be feeling on Saturday night. We're thrown for a bit of a loop. Apparently he's not doing that, but the fact that he gets this opportunity during Ramadan with all that, the UFC says, yes, we'll give you a fight. How about March during Ramadan? What do you make of that situation?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it, right? The UFC is not going to want to go into Dana White doesn't want to go into the octagon and throw a belt on Ankalaev after he 50-45s Pereira and, sits there having not done any damage and grappled him and laid on top of him for 25 minutes. It's not what the fans want to see. It's not what the UFC wants to see. It's not what sells pay-per-views. So, from that perspective, the UFC, he had asked for this rematch. He thought that the decision was bad against Jan Blachowicz. He should have finished that fight, should have left it in the hands of the judges. I believe he was like a minus 3,000 favorite in the 5th round of that fight. So bad decision, understand that. But however, Ankalaev has been waiting for this fight for several years now, and he hasn't gotten it. And the UFC's been pushing it off. So now, the UFC's kind of looking at him like, hey, do you want the opportunity or not? And he's like, well, I can't fight in March. It's Ramadan. It's like, well, do you want it or not? There is that's it. He's like, we're running a business here. We have a card to fill. Do you want to fight? And he was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. That's how I think the conversation went, honestly. And it's tough for Ankalaev. You can't wait. Most Muslim fighters don't fight during Ramadan. Like Khabib Nurmagomedov never did. Khamzat Chimaev hasn't. That it just doesn't really happen during Ramadan. It would be impossible to cut that kind of weight while not drinking or eating anything during the daytime, it'd be impossible. It would screw up your entire sleep schedule. It would be a disaster. So, you have to. He has to throw it away. There's no physical way that he could do it while maintaining any sort of body health. And I mean, weight cutting isn't healthy anyway, but he would be passing out during the days. It wouldn't happen. It'd be impossible.
Alrighty, so I think that covers Magomed Ankalaev and Alex Pereira's bout as the headliner for UFC 313. We've also got a great co-main event, which we talked extensively about last week in relation to the news that Dan Hooker would be replaced by Rafael Fiziev to take on Justin Gaethje, which is actually a rematch. Eric, I know you watched a lot of tape on that first fight, and you have some opinions on how it went, but how do you see this one?
So this fight opened at Fiziev at -135. It's been ballooned up. It's -165 Fiziev. So some money coming in on Fiziev here. Not a lot of belief in Gaethje. He's getting older. He's taking a lot of damage, and that Max Holloway knockout is one of the worst ones we've ever seen. So it's hard to just jump in here and be like, I trust Gaethje here. It's not easy. Fiziev's younger, Fiziev's faster, and we saw both of those things in the first fight. Now, what we saw also is that Gaethje was able to beat up his body pretty good. He was a lot of liver shots, mostly punches, and then he was also chopping down his legs. By the end, Fiziev couldn't really lift his hands up, and he was just getting hit in the face, and his eyes were really, really swollen. That obviously affected Fiziev in the third round. He was getting hit, probably couldn't see the shots coming in. He did get eye poked in the second round. Surprise, surprise. Eye pokes are part of the sport. And, they seem to affect the outcome of, pretty much every fight that we watch, which is frustrating. But I think what the prevailing sentiment going into this fight is, what does Gaethje look like in there? Is Gaethje the same guy? And Fiziev probably learned a good amount in that first fight. One thing that I wanted to talk about was that Gaethje really found a home for his uppercut. That's like his best punch. His uppercut was landing pretty much at will, and I don't know how Fiziev even ate them and didn't get knocked out. That fight went to a decision. Most of the time when I see two fighters who have already fought each other, I see those as being chess matches, and I see this one going to a decision, but it's hard to trust Gaethje's chin at this point. He's a wild card. He's the most violent man in the sport, but eventually that has to accumulate. It has to show its face in the octagon at some point.
Yeah, I mean, we know this. They're no good. It would be so MMA for a fan favorite like Justin Gaethje to have that happen. It would be ironic because, Justin Gaethje kind of put that life-changing beating on Tony Ferguson, but we'll see what happens. Sorry?
It's one of those things that it comes around in the sport. I don't know if you ever watched Game of Thrones, but
yes, the red wedding.
Yeah, well, so not even that. I was gonna go with when Ramsey looks at like one of his victims, I forget who, he's like, if you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention. It's kind of how MMA is. If you think MMA has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention. Yeah.
No, that's very true. But you talked about it before in terms of, obviously Justin had that brutal knockout, albeit fantastic, great TV at UFC 300. So that's obviously a concern going in for him. On Rafael Fiziev's end, he's been out for a while. He had an injury. How do you see those? Do you think those things might end up canceling each other out, negating? How do you see these two guys coming in with those kind of situations that they had?
From a betting perspective, I don't factor them in because I feel like they like you said, like, do they cancel each other out? When we get in the octagon, I have no idea. But pre-fight, what do I price into a bet? I cancel it, honestly, because I don't know what kind of shape Gaethje's going to be in. I mean, he did a fight camp, but what kind of damage? What are we looking at the same fighter? Is he going to go in there and be a totally different guy? That's totally possible. We don't know yet. And the same with Fiziev. He hurt his leg and he's been out for a long time. He's taking this on short notice. But I have equal amount of concerns about Gaethje. So I cancel it out from a betting perspective. I think that there's value on Fiziev. He's -225. Yeah, I think he was -225 in the first fight. I have no problem with -160.
And I believe you said this before. You said you saw this one going the distance. This is their second fight. You said you've done some research on this particular subject before. When there are rematches, they tend to go a little bit longer.
Yeah. So when I was working at the Action Network, I did a real deep dive, like rematches and trilogies. How often do they go to decision? I ended up finding out that in trilogy specifically was the big one, right? The big one was it was like 80% of trilogy fights end up going the distance in the third fight. They just know each other too well. There's no surprises anymore. So I thought that was a really interesting betting angle. So anybody that wants to bet on and anytime there's a trilogy fight, bet on to go the distance, auto. It doesn't even matter what the odds are. And then another one that I had was that whoever wins the second fight usually wins the third fight in trilogy. So basically, just in rematches in general, even if they've sparred together, I'm willing to take a shot at a decision. Like one time that it has worked that it didn't work out was when Rosenstruck, his most recent fight. I forget who he fought, but Rosenstruck's most recent fight, like it was kind of a sparring match, and it was plus 250, and it was like, oh well, they train together and they know each other. And it's like, oh well,
Pavlovich, right?
Yeah. It's like, oh well, I mean, if I knew that they were sparring partners, then of course I would. They know each other. They know there's no surprises then. So I think that's a big part of MMA is just familiarity.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Now, just because it's going to a decision, I mean, the first fight was great. That one went to a decision. Just because it's going to a decision doesn't mean that it's not going to be a great fight. But I guess, having those considerations that these guys, Gaethje's coming out of that knockout loss. Sometimes in the past, after having some brutal beatings, he's kind of calmed down a little bit in his fight. But just yesterday at media day, someone's like, what are you going to do if he points at the ground? He's like, I'll accept that challenge. I've never not accepted it. And, of course, with Rafael coming off of that injury and having the fight, the first fight to look back on, maybe he plays a little bit more technical. My question is this: is there any way that this fight does not turn out to what we're all expecting it to be, which is a bloodbath?
Oh, every fight, Justin Gaethje will never be in a bad fight. That's a fact. He even does like that rolling thunder, like he tries to hit him with the back of his heel and like it's like one of the coolest things. Like he's box office, man. Like he does the backflip off the cage. Like he is box office. He's fun. And I'll just say this card is stacked. It is loaded. There are so many good fights. It's really incredible. Especially the last three fights. Like all of them aren't going the distance. It's going to be a blast. So, I mean, this fight's going to be amazing. The last three fights are all going to be amazing. I don't envy Dana White's job of who's going to win fight of the night.
Yes, there we go. And that's a great transition. Let's talk about the fight just below that, Jalen Turner versus Ignacio Bahamondes. How do you like that fight? What's tell us about it?
Yeah, this is an amazing bout. So Jalen Turner, I mean, obviously he fought Renato Moicano last time, and he, looked like he had a knockout. He basically walked off the octagon before referee called it, and then he loses in the second round. He had Renato Moicano badly hurt. He walked off. He should have followed up. He did not. Big mistake by Turner. Cost him his win bonus. Cost him some money. Cost him a win. Cost him another closer to the title. Now he fights Ignacio Bahamondes. No one's expecting this one to go to decision. Minus 225 that it doesn't go the distance. I'll have a bet on this one in a little bit, but. Jalen Turner, I expect him to move forward. He'd be the one that's moving forward here. I think Bahamondes loves his counter striking. He's got that check right hook that's just nasty. And he also does like a lot of spinning kicks. His body kicks are really good. And, potentially for a setup for a head kick, he's done that many times in the past. So, man, this is going to be a big fight. And also like big, literally, like big physically. Like these guys are really big for 155. Like this is a big fight, bigger guys. I don't even know how they make this weight. But I think that, no matter, there's just so many ways for this to end. Turner's the really good submission grappler. Bahamondes has gotten, crazy strikes. Turner's got knockout power too. This is my pick for fight of the night.
Alrighty, there we go. Some high praise. So I think that kind of wraps up some of the biggest fights of UFC 313. A lot of other good ones on there, so make sure you get to watch the prelims. 6 p.m. Eastern time, those prelims start. And the main card, of course, as per the typical schedule at 10 p.m. Eastern in Las Vegas this weekend. Some fights to watch. Scott, of course, is not here. We forgot to mention that at the beginning. If you haven't noticed, it feels a little bit empty without him. But he got his procedure done, said it went all right, and he'll be back with us in a few short weeks. His pick of the night, which is a great one, also on that main card, is Mauricio Hufi taking on Bobby Green. Bobby Green, of course, legend of the sport. He's been a veteran of the UFC, had so many fights, and you know what? He's an underdog tonight, and he's been an underdog in many fights in the past. And he's taking on Mauricio Hufi, who is, of course, a member of the Fighting Nerds. His first fight in the UFC, he was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. He threw a scissor sweep, which I've never seen done live on the UFC. That's just something that people warn you not to do in jiu-jitsu gyms, or else you'll tear someone's ACL, right? And he was.
I've seen it in jiu-jitsu. I've seen it in jiu-jitsu, but not in men.
Yeah, right. So he's just like throwing, like spamming Xbox buttons basically, and then he comes out in a second fight at in the UFC at Madison Square Garden back in November. I was there watching that fight, and it was a pretty lackluster win. You know, it went to a decision, and I don't know, you have a crazy first fight like that, it's kind of hard to live up to those expectations, but it really wasn't that great of a fight. So maybe in this next one, he'll kind of go maybe a little bit back in the direction that he started with. So that's definitely a great fight. I mean, it's kind of, even though with Bobby Green as an underdog, he likes to play spoiler a lot. So that'll be an interesting one. Eric, what's one that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, so I mean, this one, look, is going to be the most fun fight in the card. I actually would say it might be one of the more boring fights in the card, but I'm just very interested in it. And the reason that I'm interested is, so it's Curtis Blades versus Rizvian Kiniev. He fought in the PFL most recently. He beat Renan Ferreira, and that was overturned to a no contest. But Renan Ferreira is pretty highly thought of in the heavyweight division, and he fought Ngannou. He lost, but who else loses to Ngannou? Everybody. So, you know, I think Kuniev could be a really, really tough problem for Curtis Blades. Curtis Blades at one point I thought was the best fighter at heavyweight besides Ngannou. I had so many bets on Blades to win heavyweight title by the end of the year. It was crazy. So by the end of, I think it was 2023 or 2024, I forget. But Blades has bought into the theory of you can't wrestle, you have to be more exciting, you have to strike. And Ankalaev this has been a consistent issue. Grapplers feel the pressure to put on exciting fights. You know, I guess easier said than done. If I was a fighter, I would just go for the wins. I think that Blades could take every heavyweight down, and I think he could get on top of them and hammer fist. I want to see where Blades is at. Blades has been knocked out 5 times now. He is not a striker, yet he continues to try to strike to be entertaining. But at what cost? Go be a grappler. I want to see him in grappling exchanges with Kuniev. He grappled Renan Ferreira. He looked good doing it. Now, it was overturned to no contest because he got popped for steroids. So, you know, I don't know exactly what kind of value that had to him in that fight. Probably a lot. So, again, for me, I just want to see where Blades is at. I think there could be some value on Kuniev. He's plus 250 underdog. But, you know, and again, I have a bet on that one as well, and it's not that bet. But I'm just interested to see where we're at with Curtis Blades at this point. He's been knocked out so many times. He's such a bad striker. I don't know why he continues doing it, but alas, here we are.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a common theme in MMA. You know, you got those wrestlers coming in, falling in love with the striking, even if it's not that pretty to look at. But for this weekend, kind of wrapping up UFC 313, and we'll get to your bets in a second. Scott, not here, but normally he would give us his MMA rating. He was kind enough to provide it to us. He ran the numbers. It's an 83, so that would technically be in the top 17 percentile of all UFC events, and that takes into account Gutierrez's opponent, so that those numbers are accurate after that fight swap. This is similar to last February, when Volkanovski was fighting Topuria, also another good card. So this is a solid card. If you've got time Saturday night to get watching these fights early, go for it. With that, to wrap up UFC 313, Eric, what are your bets that you're looking at for this weekend? You got 3 minutes, 3 bets, 3 minutes. The clock is ticking.
All right, three minutes on the clock. It's been a really good time betting for me so far this year. Up 12 units on the card for every New York Post article that I posted. Now, the show wise, I'm still working on it, so we'll get better there. But article every Friday in the paper and every Saturday morning. So for this card, I'm going to start off with Arman Petrosyan versus Bruno Ferreira. I've always been a fan of Arman Petrosyan's volume striking. He's a really, really good striker. Now I know he got knocked out by Magomed, and that was highlight reel level stuff. For me, I like his volume and I like his technique. I think that if he can avoid the early onslaughter from Bruno Ferreira, I think that Petrosyan wins this one. So I think he takes it to a decision. I think he 29-28 unanimous decision for Arman Petrosyan. You get him by decision at plus 270. I'm a big fan of his, and I think that he gets this one done. The only woman fight on the card for the second fight. Let's go to Amanda Lemos versus Yasmin Lucindo. Amanda Lemos, man, there's seemingly no respect for her on the betting market. And, Yasmin Lucindo, she trains with Kamaru Usman, and Kamaru is very, very high praise for her, but her strength of schedule isn't that much. I would consider this a step down for Amanda Lemos. She's fought the cream of the crop. She's fought for titles, and story for life. She has to avoid the takedown, obviously, but I like her submission game. I like her striking. I think that she's the more violent, more active fighter. So from my perspective, I'm looking at Amanda Lemos here. I don't think she should be a plus 120 dog. I really don't. So I'm going to take Amanda Lemos there, plus 120, and the only women's fight of the entire card. It's slated for the main card at this point. So last one, we just talked about Jalen Turner versus Ignacio Bahamondes. I think this is going to be a box office. I think that Turner's going to be going forward a lot, and Bahamondes is hittable, no doubt about it. So I'm not even picking a winner here, honestly. I think there's some value at Turner money line at plus 110, but I'm not even going to take it. I'm going to go with the fight doesn't start round 2. It's minus 110. It's on Fanatics. It's better than the doesn't go the distance prop is minus 225. Third round finish, I don't think he even gets that far. I think Turner can grapple. I think he can strike. And I think Bahamondes can also strike. And I think that Turner is also hittable as well. I think that you're just looking at a really, really interesting fight. And just imagine Turner, Gaethje, Pereira, those last 3 fights are going to be amazing. All of them are going to go end inside the distance, most likely. Fiziev, we'll see, but it's going to be really interesting.
Violence on violence on violence. I love it. Alrighty. With that wrapped up, that's UFC 313 out of the way. We've also had some news this week from TKO, the group that owns the UFC. To preface, to give a little bit of context, the first that we had heard of this news, which is, I'm sure you know by now, TKO has announced that they're creating a boxing league in partnership with The Ring, of course, with Saudi Arabia and Turkey Al-Sheikh, and Sela, as well as the third company. The first inklings that we'd gotten about this were a few weeks ago when the CEO of Endeavor, Aryeh Emanuel, was on a call, and he was talking about them going into boxing, talking about the Ali Act, which is pretty important. We'll get into that into a second. Next thing that we hear is the TKO's Mark Shapiro is talking about how they've gotten these talks even further with the Saudis, and that they're going to be making this boxing league that Saudis would be covering the cost of this. They'd be putting on 4 major events. That caused quite a stir, and then boom, out of nowhere, yesterday, breaking news, press release comes out. They've officially launched it, and there's a lot of questions surrounding this. So, Eric, I just got to quickly ask you, what was your first reaction to that press release yesterday?
Well, the Saudis have been trying to get into American sports for a while. That's been like one of their main sources of, or more one of their main focuses with their business. They have basically, without getting too far into the details, Saudi Arabia has a private hedge fund where all of the money of the entire Saudi Arabian country is, and then they distribute it into investments. And one of the main, it's called the PIF. And then, basically that they distribute all the money, and that they're focused on American sports. They, obviously Live Golf was one big one. And there's been other attempts as well. So now you're getting into boxing. My main question is what kind of who's going to be running the boxing side? Is it going to be Dana doing it? Because I argue that he already doesn't have enough time. He's doing Power Slap, he's doing UFC now, he's doing boxing. Who's actually running it, or is he just the face and a promoter, which is fine? But I have questions about it for mixed martial arts. and like also like who's going to be fighting in it, and what's the plan, and I don't know. There's a lot of questions to have here. Obviously, like it's good business. TKO doesn't even have to throw in any money, so it's good business, right? But I got questions about the league itself. Ali Act is also another interesting topic, and I'll let you take it away from there. It's tough. It's a weird. It's a weird. Boxing is a weird world, man. It's like Jake Paul's the number one star, and then now you have this. It's like, what are we even doing here?
Yeah. So as far, I don't have a concrete answer as far as, because the answers aren't out yet. But as far as what I would hypothesize is he loves to have control over things. I mean, even with like something like Power Slap, it seems that he's the guy kind of taking the helm on that. But it's interesting that you bring that up, because obviously we're kind of expecting a UFC-ified boxing thing, but that's really what they've kind of said, that they want this new TKO Boxing League to follow the model of the UFC. And I think something that you could absolutely agree on, not just on the model of how they make fights and how they run their business, but just think about this. Boxing, I mean, you've probably watched more boxing fights than I have, and UFC, going from UFC production, from watching a UFC fight to watching a boxing fight, it's like, man, there is so much time in between fights. They're like playing all these concerts and stuff, and it's hard to watch fight to fight, So just the fact that the UFC is getting into boxing and doing their own production, which is world class, because keep in mind, the UFC at the end of the day, it's a product. And they're the best in the world at that, I would argue. So they're coming in, they're revolutionizing, the boxing watching experience. And then on top of that, you've got the ring, which Canelo Alvarez has just signed a 4-fight deal, I believe. And you've got these 4 super fights that they're planning on doing. A lot of people have been talking about having Canelo Crawford being one of those 4 super fights, and that's kind of where the model takes off, right? We'll get a little bit into the Ali Act in a second, but for a first starter event, kind of getting people to invest in this new boxing league organization, whatever you want to call it, it's still pretty unclear as to how that works. But if you're going to try and start something from the ground up, and you want to introduce the world to some of your fighters that you've signed and get them to know them, that's a heck of a way to do it. So what do you think about that?
I mean, you hit it right. You hit the nail on the head on that. The production and the pacing boxing's pacing is terrible. PFL's pacing is terrible. Every fight there's just too long of a time. The UFC just throw every fight. It's like go, 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 go. That's a really good point. Boxing needs that. Boxing needs better pacing. Boxing, get out of here with the concerts and when the walkouts and all that. They need pacing. You're here to watch the sport. Let's give you the product. You're here for the product. Let's give you the product. Not going to sell you all this other stuff that you don't need. The UFC is excellent at that. Boxing could definitely use that. PFL, I don't know why they haven't. I think it has something to do. I have an idea that I think it has something to do with the TV timing, but the UFC figured it out. PFL should figure it out. I think that's a really, really good point.
Yeah. So as far as the other questions that I had myself, you've been hearing, like I mentioned at the start of this call, right? So they're talking about the Ali Act, and it's no secret that from a promotions standpoint, the Ali Act gives you less, freedom to do what you want to do. The Ali Act is there to protect the fighters. That's why boxers these days make millions on millions on millions of dollars, right? John Jones asked for $10, or not $10, $10 million to fight Francis Ngannou, and the UFC is like, get out of here with that. What are you, crazy? And then you've got Francis Ngannou going over to boxing and making however many times that, right? So the Ali Act, of course, doesn't apply to MMA. That's why there's such a crazy disparity in there. But so, yeah, the Ali Act is there to protect the fighters. Now, obviously, since it still applies to boxing, that's something that TKO has to deal with, and I imagine that's one of many reasons why they would have brought on Turki Al-Sheikh. He's got insanely deep pockets, like you were talking about. Not that if the Ali Act wasn't a thing that they wouldn't bring on Turki Al-Sheikh. Please pay the money if you've got it, right? But my biggest question was how this is going to affect them trying to make this into a boxing version of the UFC, because it can't be exactly the same, right? There's got to be some, or I guess that's my question, is how is it going to be different, if at all? Can they make it the same? Because it seems like that's the end goal, right? Now, if the Ali Act does get repealed, which there is a guy sitting in the White House that is pretty close friends with a pretty powerful person at TKO. Who knows what could happen there, but pretty much the floodgates open, all bets are off. We could see, well, the world of boxing would change as we know it, and the TKO coming in as the new kid in town with funds on funds on funds. That's a pretty crazy thought. I know I was just talking for a minute. Do you have any reactions to what I just said, or any questions or clarifications about that?
I mean, you're right. Like Dana White and Trump, real good friends. If Dana asks for something, he'll probably get it. So that's definitely part of it. And that's and not related to this, but that's been a point of contention for the UFC, is that they had a hard time getting some green cards or visas to get fighters in to fight in the United States, like Khamzat Chimaev. And Dana White knows a guy now, so Khamzat can fight in the United States now anytime he wants. So I think that's a good point. I think that it could be repealed based on that alone. If Dana wants it repealed, it could be repealed. But again, it's not Dana White's money. That's what's crazy. This is like one of the more bizarre business dealings I've ever seen. It's like, we're going to pay you. We're going to do, it's like, you don't have to worry about any money. You just do it. And it's like, okay, like that's the best business deal ever. It's like, I don't know. It's like, you live in this house and you could just live in it and I'll pay for it. You don't have to do anything. It's like, okay, like, sounds good. Or like, you buy this hotel, like, I'll buy the hotel, you can live in it, and just see if you can get some people to come in and stay there. Like, it's really one of the craziest business deals ever. Dana White, I mean, he knows how to sell it, no doubt. You can make fun of him for it, but I mean, at the end of the day, he knows how to sell it. He has one of the crazier business dealings ever. This is wild, a wild business deal.
Turkey loves boxing, as we've found out. This is just, it's insane. For the love of the game is crazy. One thing I also wanted to quickly mention is that they said that there would be no crossover fights. Obviously, of course, UFC and TKO, umbrella company. Pereira had said that he was interested in going into that. Obviously, he's got a few fights left, in his career, given he's inching closer to 40, right? And he's got insane striking. So boxing is something that people have seen, possibly as an option for him. He said he was interested. Dana, I've got a quote here. He said, "No, never. I'm sure there are guys that want to box, but I literally don't want to see any of that." Who knows? Dana's word isn't gospel, as we have seen before. So who knows what'll happen with that. But yeah, I think that kind of sums up this whole boxing saga. At this point, it's kind of just waiting for answers, seeing what happens, So with that, with the big news out of the week, we've previewed this weekend. Let's go into some quick hits.
Yeah, so go news and notes from around the mixed martial arts and combat world. Dana White said that John Jones versus Tom Aspinall is going to happen this summer, which I think is interesting. It could be a fun fight. Obviously, we've been waiting for that. If they don't bring that fight in, we got problems. And then Alex Pereira could fight the winner of that fight. If he were to win this fight, he's kind of nothing left for him at the light heavyweight division. So real interesting there. The PFL finally finalized heavyweight and light heavyweight rosters, so definitely go check those out. Their season's starting, I believe, at the end of April. And then Jake Paul also signed Amanda Serrano to a lifetime contract. It's one of the more bizarre things I've ever heard. I've heard some weird things about the Amanda Serrano camp and all that stuff. And the lifetime contract, I have questions. But that she is now fighting at Madison Square Garden in July. Amanda Serrano versus Katie Taylor 3. The trilogy, even though Serrano's lost the first two, all close fights. And then Power Slap had a TNT contract, had a Rumble contract. Now it's on to YouTube. And then if it fails there, I'd say that's probably the end of Power Slap. So that's your news and notes. It's not looking good for Power Slap, though. So, Jake, we gave you some homework last week. Nick Diaz versus Takanori Gomi. Real fun fight back in the mid-2000s. Did you watch it?
I did. So I wasn't sure what the situation would be with this fight. Obviously, it's a Pride fight back in the day. I was not watching Pride when that was around. I was too young for that. But yeah, I started the fight off, and it was, don't get me wrong, it was a great fight, but I was kind of, wondering maybe what the whole shtick about this fight was, and it looked oddly familiar to me in a lot of ways. And then it came in about the 10th minute. Boom, literally out of nowhere, Gogo Plata, Nick Diaz. And I literally throw my arms up. I'm like, that's the Gogo Plata. That's the Gogo Plata. If you don't know, Gogo Plata is a submission where you're using the top of your foot to cut the carotid arteries off your back in the guard. And listen, when you think of Gogo Plata, or at least for me personally, I think of Nick Diaz. So getting that visual, that was a nice surprise. And if you don't know, I think the reason why Scott picked this fight is because it's his favorite submission, Gogo Plata, and this is the best Gogo Plata of them all.
Yeah, well, Gogo Plata is everybody's favorite submission because it's the one. But yeah. So that fight's amazing. It's interesting watching MMA in a boxing ring, right? But
yes,
I think I like the cage better, but I don't hate the boxing ring either.
They had to reset them at times, which is completely foreign to me.
Yeah, it kind of disrupts the pace of the fight, which is weird, but it's super interesting. Back in the day, that's what it was. So this week in MMA, it's recording this, it's March 6th, and not too long ago, I believe it was way back in 2016. It was Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor 1, which was March 5th, and that fight was just unbelievable. You have the last second press conference. He takes it on 10 days notice. You do the last second press conference at a random gym. Nate and Nick and Connor are yelling at each other. And, Connor's like, I like Nick's little bro. You know what I mean? How can I not like him? It's just so much fun. Watch the build up. That is just amazing. That fight. I mean, that was when I was getting into MMA. When Conor fought Mendez, that was my introduction into MMA, and that Nate Diaz Conor buildup was box office. It was unbelievable. But yeah, and then we're getting to fight assignment here. This is a fun one. When Brock Lesnar left WWE, he went to the NFL and he tried out for the Vikings, and apparently actually showed very well. Was one of the last guys cut by the Vikings. How crazy is that? Played defensive tackle. And then he went to the UFC and he fought Frank Mir in the first fight. That is your fight assignment of the day. UFC 81 co-main event. Frank Mir versus Brock Lesnar 1. They would fight again, but we'll save that for another time.
Legendary. All right, we got a sequel coming up. All right, cool. I mean, Frank Mir, legend of the game. I mean, that's a true heavyweight submission specialist, so I'm excited for that one. You guys go ahead and watch it too. Eric, I think we're all set here. Yeah?
Yeah. You did pretty good without Scott. We miss you, Scott. We got to get you back here.
We're making do without him, but he is sorely missed. Scott, if you're listening, get well soon. Hoping you have a speedy recovery.
Watch some fights.
Watch those fights, man. Yeah, see, Scott's got some good Twitter posts, by the way, as far as scoring rounds go. We'll see what happens, but yeah, enjoy the fights if you're watching, and we'll see you next week.